Have you ever been in a coffee shop, looked at two bags of beans from the exact same country, and just wondered why their tasting notes are so wildly different? Okay, let's get into it, because the answer is one of the most fascinating secrets in the coffee world. Right? How can one cup be so crisp and clean, almost tea-like, while the one right next to it is heavy, super sweet, and just bursting with these blueberry notes? The beans might look the same, but the experience is on another planet. And here it is, the secret. It's not just about where the coffee is grown. It's all about what happens after that coffee cherry is picked. These post-harvest processing methods, they're responsible for up to 60% of the flavor in your cup. That's a total game changer. So, in this explainer, we're going to follow coffee's journey down two very different paths. We'll get into the science of fermentation, check out a popular middle ground, explore some really cutting-edge innovations, and then we'll bring it all back to your next cup of coffee. All right, let's start with the two foundational methods. You can think of this as the big fork in the road that decides where a coffee's flavor journey is going to go. So the huge difference is this. It all comes down to when the fruit of the coffee cherry gets removed from the seed inside, what we call the coffee bean. With the washed process, that fruit is scrubbed off almost right away using water. But with the natural process, the whole cherry is just left to dry in the sun, letting the fruit and the bean hang out together for weeks. With the washed process, the name of the game is clarity. After the outer skin is gone, the beans go for a soak in water. This kicks off a short fermentation that breaks down that sticky fruit layer, which is then totally washed away. What you're left with is a clean bean, ready to be dried, where the fruit has had very little influence on the final flavor. Now compare that to the natural process. It's totally different. Here, the whole intact coffee cherries are laid out on these big raised beds to dry for weeks. They have to be raked all the time to make sure they dry evenly and nothing funky starts to grow. Only after the cherry has shriveled up like a little raisin is the dried fruit finally taken off the bean. And this table really shows you what that means for your cup. Washed coffees give you pure clarity. You're tasting the bean itself. It's bright, acidic, and often has this clean, tea-like quality. Natural coffees, on the other hand, are all about the fruit. They absorb all that sweetness while they dry, which gives them a much heavier body and those rich, jammy, berry-like flavors. So, why do these methods create such different results? Well, the magic word is fermentation. But it's probably not what you're thinking. We're not talking about making some kind of coffee kombucha here. Coffee fermentation is a natural step that just has to happen. All these little microbes, yeasts, and bacteria that are already on the cherry, they get to work breaking down the sugars in that sticky fruit layer, which is called mucilage. Now this is what's so cool. Fermentation is doing two critical jobs at the same time. First is basically housekeeping. It's the best way to get that stubborn, sticky fruit off the bean. But second, and this is the really important part, those microbes are producing all these amazing new compounds, things like organic acids and esters that become flavor precursors, just waiting to be woken up by the heat of the roaster. And you can actually see the result right here. Because the natural process dries the fruit right on the bean, it holds on to way more of the original sugars, like sucrose. That higher sugar content in the green bean is a huge reason why the final roasted coffee tastes so much sweeter. Simple as that. Okay, so it's not just a strict choice between washed or natural. There's actually this beautiful middle ground that producers use to create even more complex and interesting flavors. And that's called the honey process. What they do here is remove the outer skin, but instead of washing all that sticky mucilage off, they intentionally leave some of it on while the bean dries. It's a hybrid method that really tries to get the sweetness of a natural process while keeping some of the clean acidity of a washed coffee. But the choice of process isn't just about taste. Real-world factors like the environment play a massive role. For example, the washed process is incredibly water-intensive. In some places, it can take over 200 liters of water just to process 1 single kilogram of coffee. So for farmers in areas where water is scarce, the natural or dry process isn't just a choice, it's a necessity. So, building on all this foundational science, we're now seeing producers move way beyond these traditional methods. They're becoming flavor architects, really meticulously designing the exact sensory profile of their coffee. As Felipe Sardi, who's a pioneer in coffee production, says, the industry has shifted to this era of scientifically guided fermentation. It's not about just letting nature do its thing anymore. It's about controlling every single variable to create specific, repeatable, and frankly, extraordinary flavors.
And the tools they're using are getting seriously advanced. Producers are using these sealed, oxygen-free tanks to create what's called anaerobic fermentations. They're adding specific starter cultures of yeast, a lot like in winemaking, to push the flavor in a certain direction. Some are even co-fermenting coffee with other things, like fruit pulp or even hops, to create completely new taste experiences.
So, after all that science, what does this actually mean for you when you're standing there, trying to pick out a bag of coffee?
Well, here's the simple takeaway. When you see washed on a bag, I want you to think clarity and bright acidity. When you see natural, think sweetness and a heavier body. And now you know the reason why. It all comes down to how those tiny little microbes were allowed to work their magic during fermentation.
So the next time you choose a coffee, remember, you're not just picking a place on a map. You're choosing a craft, a science, and a very specific flavor journey. So, are you going to go for the clean, bright notes of a washed coffee or the sweet, fruity complexity of a natural? The choice is all yours.